Fort Sungard sits on the border of Whiterun Hold and the Reach. It's a very strategic location because it controls access to not only the small farming village of Rorikstead, but it also has access to two major roads. So if you want to conduct trade from Whiterun to Falkreath or Markarth, you will have to probably pass by this fort. At least it would make things a lot easier for trade. And the fort itself sits atop this mountain, which means it is very easy to defend. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to Unexplored Skyrim. Today we're going to be checking out Fort Sungard, which is a very interesting fort, I think, in Skyrim. It kind of almost could act as a small town or small settlement because of all of the facilities it has, and it's a very large fort, I must say. But despite what I just said in its strategic location, Fort Sungard has fallen into a state of disrepair, and the first time you come here, it'll be occupied by Forsworn. However, Eric the Slayer gives us some hint as to why so many forts across Skyrim are in such poor condition.
The Jarls never want to pay to keep their forts. They just keep slipping further into ruin.
So according to Eric, at least, it appears that greed is part of the reason why Skyrim's forts are in such bad condition. So according to Eric the Slayer, greed is at least one of the reasons the forts are in such poor condition. Of course, there could be a plethora of other reasons, but it is an interesting idea nonetheless. And with that, let's go ahead and check out Fort Sungard. As I said, Fort Sungard sits on the border of the Reach and Whiterun Hold. Technically, it is in the Reach, however, it's again right on the border and it provides important access to both. Also, it is just south of Rorikstead, and that is the direction from which I approached. And you will see the fort sitting up on this mountaintop from the south, and as you approach, the Forsworn will likely see you. They saw my companion, Eric the Slayer, as we approached. But, you know, not too difficult actually to kill these Forsworn compared to some of the other enemies I fought at this time. A lot of them were actually just one shot with my bow and arrow, as you can see there. So, not too difficult of a fight, and actually there's really not a whole lot of Forsworn in this fort despite how large it is. Now me and that Forsworn's arrows almost touched midair. That would have been something else. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Now, over here at the top, we have this kind of ruined entrance. I have no clue what purpose this would have served a long time ago, because it doesn't really appear there's any path to get to this entrance, but we get quite a beautiful view from this side of Whiterun. Now, if we head back, we find a magical bucket sitting underneath this like wooden shack, so I put the bucket on the ground so it stops defying the laws of gravity. And as you can see here on the other side of the fort, we can easily see the Reach. Again, this fort provides a great view of both holds and could help control traffic through both. It's a very great location and very beautiful. Now you can walk along the walls up here, and then we have the Fort Sungard Tower. The tower is actually kind of like the main facility of the fort, but like I said, this fort has a lot of facilities. If we come on down, we find this little fire pit and some pillars. This appears to be some kind of religious thing because right next to it is the Fort Sungard Shrine. But we'll talk more about the shrine later. And if we move over here, below us, that door led to the barracks. But if you just walk along the walls, you can get some very beautiful views of the surrounding area. And this little part jets out. Again, underneath us right here is the barracks, but this part, it looks really cool from afar, even if it is just the barracks beneath us. And there's Eric the Slayer, and you get a pretty good view of the rest of the fort from there. Now, as we come down to the lower portion of this wall over here, I just found a really interesting little scene. We find a flute and a bottle of Hunting Brew mead. So perhaps somebody was enjoying a drink and just playing the flute, enjoying the beautiful view that they were offered. But as you see, this fort has a lot of space, it has a lot of paths and kind of wooden shacks, and it could easily serve as a small village even, but obviously it's meant for military purposes. And here we find the Fort Sungard muster, and this leads us to the barracks and also the mess hall, so this is where soldiers would sleep and eat. Obviously, it kind of, at least the first level, appears that maybe soldiers haven't occupied it in a while. However, if we go downstairs, the scene looks a little different. Interesting anyways, doesn't matter. In this room, there's a bunch of chests and beds, and at the very end, we can find a copy of The Last Scabbard of Okrash, and this book will increase your smithing. Also, Gorza Gra Bogol and Markarth wants a copy of this book, So if you give the book to her, she will give you another smithing point. So make sure you take this book and take it with you to Markarth. And as we make our way downstairs, we can find the kitchen, which appears to have been in use recently. So while the mess hall might be abandoned, perhaps the Forsworn were using the kitchen because we can find various food and ingredients. In the very back here, we find this pool. Perhaps it was used as some kind of toilet or something. I'm not entirely sure, but we can actually exit through this drain here, which just kind of leads us to the cliffside. Now, it is worth mentioning that Fort Sungard will be a part of the Civil War quest, and you will have to take back the fort for either the Imperials or the Stormcloaks, so this little hidden tunnel here could be used to your advantage. After that, we can move on to the Fort Sungard Shrine, and this shrine will change depending on who occupies the fort. If the Forsworn control the fort, the shrine will be a shrine of Kynareth. And if the Imperials control the fort, it'll be a shrine of Akatosh. And if the Stormcloaks control the fort, it'll be a shrine of Talos. And also at the bottom of the shrine, we can find an alchemy lab along with a locked strongbox, so make sure you pick it and see what random loot you get in it. But for the shrine, that's pretty much it. So we'll make our way back outside, and we're going to head on over to the top area. And from the top, there's two areas we can access. So the first one is the Fort Sungard Annex. And in the Annex, we just find a small fireplace at the top, and if we move down, we find a lone jail cell. Not sure why or what purpose it would have served, because Fort Sungard does have an actual jail, maybe for a special prisoner or something like that. And if we move down, we can find some wood cutting and stuff like that, and then some kind of office, but there really isn't a whole lot in here besides this chest, some gold, and another chest. But if we go on outside, we find this kind of patio area, very beautiful, and it has a blacksmith and forge and stuff like that. Very beautiful and a great place to make some weapons, I must say. Man, look at that view. And if we come back up through the Annex, we can find the Fort Sungard Tower. And despite being called Tower, this pretty much acts as the main facility for the fort. As we enter, we can find this entrance on our right, which just kind of leads to a small office. This door leads out to an outdoor patio. It's very beautiful, but really not a whole lot out there. And after that, we can make our way up. This door here will lead you outside on top of the wall, which we saw much earlier in the video. And then if we go all the way to the top, we find the lone entrance to the very top of Fort Sungard. And obviously, you can get some immaculate views from up here. You can see why an army would definitely want to occupy this fort. Now, I don't know what happened, but as I was admiring the view, I found that this bird got frozen in mid-air. I think it's a bird, perhaps it's a bug or something. Don't really know, but this bug bugged out, and it was just frozen in air. I couldn't kill it. I wish I had, like, console commands or that I was on PC, so I could go over and reach it to take a closer look. But yeah, unfortunately I couldn't. Just kind of a glitch. Thought it was interesting. If you guys know what it is, please let me know in the comments. Now, if we come down to the bottom of the tower, we find another exit, and this will lead us to the Fort Sungard Oubliette. Now, this Oubliette is like a kind of prison area. At the bottom, we will find these 3 jail cells. However, there's nothing really inside of them. And then we can also find this ladder, which will take us to the top of this lone structure. And you can get some good views, but not nearly as immaculate as from the obviously highest point, the Fort Sungard Tower. But if we go back into the prison, there's actually a basement or downstairs area, and there's some very interesting things in this area. Basically, at the bottom, there is a killing hole, meaning you could just throw people in here and kill them, as you can see here, and there are some dead bodies at the bottom. I am a high enough level, so I just thought I would go ahead and fall down. I took a little bit of damage, but not too bad. At the bottom, we can find a guide to better thieving, which will increase your pickpocket. Also, you can find the Fort Sungard prison key down here, along with this dead bandit. After that, we can unlock this cell door, and then there's also some glowing mushrooms on the wall as we exit. And as we leave the cave, we can see that this small cave is directly below the fort, right on this, like, footpath. So maybe it's not so secure. It seems like if an invading army or an attacker wanted to sabotage the fort, maybe using some rope or a grappling hook, they might be able to access and perform some kind of sneak attack. And one last thing I wanted to mention is we do know Fort Sungard is very important to the Forsworn. If you head on over to Serpents Bluff Redoubt, you can find a note from the matriarch talking about Fort Sungard's importance to stopping any retreaters out of the Reach and capturing them. Also, it provides good defense from other holds across Skyrim. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of Fort Sungard. Personally, as far as design, I think it's one of my favorite forts in the game. However, there's really not a whole lot of combat here. The Forsworn are really easy, and in the interior, there's, well, no Forsworn, which is kind of interesting. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any recommendations for future locations, future video ideas, please post them in the comment section below. And, as always, until next time.